The day I stood on that cliff, the wind howling around me like a warning, I didn't know it would be the moment my entire world split in two. My name is Hilda Thompson, 60 years old, and what I'm about to tell you will forever change the way you see your own family. Just 3 days ago, I found myself standing at the edge of a cliff with my husband, Robert. Our son, Nathan, and his wife, Samantha, had invited us on what they called a special anniversary hike. They said it would be a day filled with laughter, photos, and memories. Instead, it became the day our lives nearly ended. The air was crisp, the kind of clean mountain air that fills your lungs and makes you feel alive. The trail had been quiet, only the crunch of our shoes against gravel and the occasional bird overhead. I remember looking at Robert, his face red from the climb, and thinking that even after 40 years together, he still looked strong to me. I never imagined that strength would be tested in a way neither of us could have prepared for. We reached a high point where the valley stretched endlessly below us. Samantha pulled out her camera with a smile. She asked us to step closer to the edge so she could capture the view behind us. Robert hesitated, but Nathan reassured us with his familiar, calm voice. "It's perfectly safe," he said. "I'll stand right behind you in case you stumble." For a brief second, I wanted to believe him. After all, he was my son. A mother does not easily let go of that trust, no matter how much doubt lingers. We moved back a step, then another. The rocks shifted slightly under my shoes. I gripped Robert's hand tighter. Samantha adjusted the camera. Her voice was sweet, but her eyes were sharp, almost urgent. Then Nathan moved. It was sudden, forceful. I felt his hands push against my back. Not gentle, not steady, but deliberate. The ground disappeared beneath me. The world turned into sky and air, and a terrible rushing sound. My stomach dropped, as though the earth itself had vanished. I hit the rocks hard, pain exploding through my body. My vision blurred, my breath shallow. Somewhere beside me, Robert landed with a heavy crack. I wanted to cry out, to reach for him. But then I heard his whisper, ragged and full of urgency. "Hilda, do not move. Play dead." The words cut through the pain, through the chaos. I forced myself to be still, my eyes half open, my body limp. I became nothing but silence. Above us, I could hear Samantha's voice, high and trembling, calling out about an accident. Nathan's voice followed, rehearsed and careful, already shaping a story. In that moment, the truth was clear. Our son and his wife had just tried to kill us. And this was only the beginning. Before that terrible day on the mountain, my life was not extraordinary, but it was filled with the kind of simple joys many people take for granted. Robert and I had built a life together in a modest home on the edge of a quiet town in Asheville, North Carolina. I taught at the local elementary school, where every day brought me stories of curious children and their endless questions. Robert ran a small carpentry shop behind our house. His hands, rough from years of work, could turn the plainest piece of wood into something lasting and beautiful. We had 2 sons. Daniel, our firstborn, was the light of our lives. He had a laugh that filled the house, the kind of sound that made even the darkest days seem brighter. He was quick to help his father in the shop, quick to shield me from worry, quick to dream of a future full of possibilities. Daniel wanted to study engineering, to build bridges and create things that would last far beyond his own lifetime. Nathan, our younger son, was different, quieter, more reserved, a boy who seemed to live in his own world. He did not laugh as easily as Daniel, nor did he share his brother's excitement for the future. Still, as a mother, I loved him with the same intensity. I told myself that children blossom in their own time, that Nathan simply needed patience and space to find his way. On Sundays after church, the 4 of us gathered around the oak dining table that Robert had crafted with his own hands. Daniel would share stories about his studies and plans, his voice brimming with energy, while Nathan picked at his food in silence. I often wished he would speak up, share more. But I convinced myself it was only his nature. Life was simple, and in its simplicity, beautiful. In the evenings, Robert and I walked the trail near our home, talking about the future. We imagined growing old together, watching grandchildren play in the yard, and traveling to see the ocean for the first time. I thought those walks were only a way to stay healthy. But in truth, they were training for the hardest walk of my life, the one that nearly ended on the cliff. Looking back now, I see that even in our happiest moments, shadows were already forming. The year Daniel turned 20 was the year everything changed. Until then, our family life had been marked by ordinary routine, school, work, church, and quiet evenings together. But I began to notice small cracks forming, moments when Daniel and Nathan whispered harshly in the hallway, only to fall silent when I walked in. Their arguments were never loud enough for me to catch the words, but their tense faces told me more than they realized. When I asked Robert, he brushed it off as brotherly disagreements, the kind that would pass with time. I wanted to believe him because I needed to believe our family was still whole. One October evening, Daniel did not come home for dinner. At first, I thought he had stayed late with friends or been caught up in his studies. Hours passed. By midnight, my worry had turned into panic. Robert and some neighbors searched the town, the trails, every place Daniel might have gone. Nathan stayed in his room, claiming he was studying, though I remember the strange look in his eyes when I asked about his brother. It was a mix of fear and something colder. At dawn, the search ended with news that shattered me. Daniel's body was found at the bottom of a rocky gorge just outside town. The police said he must have stumbled in the dark and fallen. Their words washed over me like ice water. An accident, they said. A tragedy no one could have prevented. I clung to that explanation because the alternative, that something darker had happened, was too unbearable to imagine. Daniel's funeral was the darkest day of my life. I wore the same black dress I had worn to my mother's funeral, but this loss was heavier than any before. I sobbed until I could no longer stand, while Nathan sat silent, his expression unreadable. He did not cry, not even once. At the time, I told myself everyone grieves differently, that his quietness was his way of coping. But now, looking back, that silence chills me to my core. Robert never left my side that day, holding me up when my legs gave out, whispering words of comfort. I thought he shared my grief entirely. What I did not know was that he carried a secret heavier than my sorrow, a secret that would stay buried for 25 years. While I mourned one son, Robert silently protected the other. After Daniel's death, Nathan changed in ways that at the time I thought were signs of maturity. The boy who had once been so withdrawn suddenly became more attentive. He offered to help me with chores, carried groceries without being asked, and sat with Robert in the workshop, as if learning the trade would bring him closer to his father. I saw it as a silver lining to our tragedy, a way for Nathan to fill the gaping void Daniel had left behind. I wanted to believe that losing his brother had awakened in him a sense of responsibility. When Nathan met Samantha, I thought my prayers had been answered. She was polite, warm, and quick to call me Mom. She helped in the kitchen during visits, laughed at Robert's corny jokes, and seemed to adore Nathan. Together, they built a small business in woodworking, following in Robert's footsteps. In time, they had 2 children, and I thought life was finally offering us a second chance at happiness. The sound of little feet running across the yard, the laughter of grandchildren. It all soothed the wound that Daniel's absence had carved into my heart. But not every mask reveals itself quickly. Looking back, I realized how carefully Nathan had constructed his. Every kind gesture, every act of attentiveness. It was part of a performance he had perfected. He wanted us to see a son who had grown into a devoted man, a father who worked hard, a husband who loved deeply. And for years, I accepted the image he presented because it was easier than questioning it. The truth, however, was far darker. Beneath the surface, Nathan was not healed or transformed. He was calculating, hiding his guilt behind a veneer of responsibility. He had not become better after Daniel's death. He had simply become better at pretending. And though I could not see it then, the same son I believed had saved me from despair was quietly preparing to destroy me. 6 months ago, the mask Nathan had worn for decades began to slip. It started with casual suggestions, spoken over dinner or while sipping coffee in our kitchen. "Mom, Dad, you should think about getting your affairs in order," he said one evening, his tone gentle but insistent. Samantha, seated beside him, smiled sweetly and added, "We only want to make sure you're protected. It's important for families to plan ahead." At first, I thought it was simply concern, but their interest quickly grew into pressure. Robert and I had worked our entire lives to build a modest nest egg. Between the house, a piece of land I had inherited from my parents, and the savings account we had carefully added to each month, we had managed to put away nearly $200,000. It wasn't a fortune, but to us it represented security, stability, and the ability to leave something behind for our grandchildren. To Nathan and Samantha, it seemed to represent opportunity. They insisted we visit a lawyer. "It'll give everyone peace of mind," Nathan said, his eyes steady on mine. He argued that we should name him and Samantha as our sole heirs. That way, he reasoned, we can make sure the grandchildren get their fair share when the time comes. Robert, ever the trusting father, nodded along. He believed Nathan was only looking out for us. But I felt something else in the way my son pressed the issue, a coldness in his insistence that unsettled me. In the weeks that followed, their visits grew more frequent, but the warmth that used to accompany them was gone. Instead of coming to share a meal or watch the children play, they came armed with suggestions, selling the house, buying life insurance policies, or granting Nathan power of attorney. "This place is too big for just the two of you," Samantha remarked one afternoon, as she inspected the living room like a buyer considering a property. "It would be so much smarter to downsize while the market is strong." Her words, coded in politeness, carried a sharp edge. She wasn't suggesting. She was directing. Robert began to waver. Practical by nature, he considered the logic in their arguments. But I couldn't shake the sense that there was more behind their urgency. Each time Nathan spoke about the future, I caught a flicker in his eyes, an impatience, almost as if he couldn't wait for us to hand everything over. That flicker haunted me. I had seen it once before, long ago, in the days leading up to Daniel's death. Back then, I ignored it. This time, I couldn't. One night, after yet another tense conversation with Nathan and Samantha about our will, Robert and I found ourselves arguing for the first time in years. He believed Nathan's concern was genuine, that we should at least consider his suggestions. I, however, felt something deeply wrong pulsing beneath the surface. As we washed dishes side by side, I asked softly, "Do you remember what Nathan was like before Daniel died? Doesn't it ever strike you as strange how quickly he changed?" Robert stopped mid-motion, a plate dripping water, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. "Hilda," he said quietly, "there are things about Daniel's death I never told you." My heart pounded as if it would break my ribs. I sat down, the dishcloth slipping from my fingers. "What do you mean?" I whispered. Robert's shoulders sagged under the weight of decades of silence. That night, I followed Nathan. I saw him with Daniel at the gorge. They were shouting, furious. Daniel had papers in his hand, bank statements. He had discovered that Nathan had been stealing money from our savings. Small amounts at first, but then more. He confronted him, demanded he confess to us. My legs trembled. I wanted to believe I had misheard. And then Robert's voice cracked. Nathan snapped. He shouted that Daniel was always the favorite, that he always had everything. And then, "Hilda," he shoved him. Robert's hands gripped the edge of the sink, knuckles white. I saw Daniel lose his balance, clawing at the air, and then he was gone. Just like that. His words felt like knives tearing through 25 years of memories. "Why didn't you tell me?" I demanded, tears streaming down my face. Robert's reply was heavy with guilt. Because when I reached Nathan, he was crying, trembling, saying it was an accident. He begged me not to tell you. I wanted to believe him. He was my son, too. And Daniel was already gone. I staggered back, clutching the counter for support. Everything I thought I knew about my family had been a lie. My sweet Daniel had been murdered by his own brother. And I had spent 25 years loving that murderer, trusting him, letting him raise his own children under my roof. Robert's confession left me hollow, broken in ways I had never imagined. In that moment, I understood that Nathan's new obsession with our finances was not about care or responsibility. It was about finishing what he had started long ago. And this time, he was coming for us. The very next evening, as if fate wanted to confirm Robert's confession, the phone rang. It was Nathan. His voice carried that same practiced warmth that once fooled me, but now only filled me with dread. "Mom," he said cheerfully, "Samantha and I were talking. Next weekend is your 40th anniversary. We want to do something special for you and Dad. How about a trip to the mountains? A little hike, a picnic, some photos. It will be perfect." Robert, who was sitting across from me at the kitchen table, heard every word. His face went pale. We exchanged a look heavy with unspoken fear. This was it. The invitation was not for a celebration. It was for our execution. My hand shook as I held the phone, but I forced my voice to sound steady. "That's very thoughtful, Nathan. Let us think about it and get back to you tomorrow." When I hung up, silence pressed down on us like a weight. Robert finally spoke, his voice low. "If we refuse, he will find another way. A fire, a car accident, something that will look even more natural. At least if we go, we know what to expect." His logic was terrifying, but it made sense. That night, we planned. Robert decided to hide his phone in his jacket and set it to record the entire trip. "If we survive," he said, "we'll have evidence. If we don't, at least the truth won't die with us." I wrote a letter to my sister, explaining everything Robert had confessed about Daniel and warning her about Nathan. I hid it among our important documents, praying she would find it if we never came back. We went to bed holding each other tightly, whispering words of love that could have been our last. For the first time, I looked at the man I had shared my life with and realized we were no longer just husband and wife. We were survivors, preparing for battle against our own flesh and blood. Saturday arrived with a clear blue sky, the kind that would normally inspire peace. Instead, it felt like a cruel joke. Nathan pulled into our driveway, whistling, as though it were just another family outing. Samantha followed close behind, carrying a bright smile and a backpack stuffed with supplies. She showed me the cookies and bottled water she had packed, and then lifted her new camera with pride. "I want to capture every moment," she said, her words twisted in my stomach, for I knew the photo she planned to take would be of our deaths. The ride to the mountains was unbearably long. Samantha hummed along to cheerful songs on the radio, while Nathan drove carefully, stopping at every sign, making sure not to draw attention. Robert slipped his hand into mine and discreetly tapped his phone, starting the recording. Every word, every sound, would be preserved. I clung to that small comfort. The trail began gently, winding through tall trees. Samantha darted ahead, pointing out flowers and snapping pictures, playing the role of a joyful daughter-in-law. Nathan lingered behind us, his presence heavy on our backs. Each time I turned, he gave me a smile that never reached his eyes. "You doing okay, Mom?" "Dad." His voice was syrupy sweet, but every syllable dripped with menace. After nearly an hour, the trail grew steeper. My legs ached. Robert's breathing grew ragged. And still, Nathan pressed us forward. Finally, Samantha exclaimed, "Look at that cliff. The view will be incredible for pictures." My blood ran cold. This was it, the place they had chosen. The cliff towered above us, the rocks loose and jagged, the drop below unforgiving. It was the perfect place for a staged accident. We followed reluctantly, scrambling over shifting stones, until we reached the top. The valley stretched out before us, breathtaking and terrible all at once. "Stand closer to the edge," Samantha instructed, raising her camera. Robert squeezed my hand, reminding me of the recording. I nodded and stepped back with him, the abyss yawning behind us. "Perfect," Nathan said, moving closer. His tone changed, darker now, no longer needing to pretend. Samantha's smile hardened. "Hug each other," she said. "And smile. This will be your last photo." In that instant, I knew the time had come. Robert and I stood at the edge, our son and his wife ready to end our lives. And all we could do was brace for the final push. The fall left us battered and bleeding. Rescue teams found us and worked with a precision that felt foreign after the chaos of the cliff. I remember the harsh smell of antiseptic, the way light stung my eyes, and the constant beeping of machines. Paramedics moved quickly, checking vitals, securing us to stretchers. All the while, Nathan and Samantha circled the scene, with the practiced grace of actors playing their parts, distraught, shocked, relieved that they had survived what everyone would call a terrible accident. At the emergency room, the staff separated patients and began triage. Robert and I were stabilized and prepped for transport to surgery. For hours, I lay very still, every breath a conscious effort. I kept my eyes mostly closed, listening for the voices around me. Nathan's had that same measured tone, soft, convincing, calculated. Samantha's sobs were loud in public, perfect for the witnesses who might later be called to testify on their behalf. It was a young nurse, her name was Lauren, who changed everything. She was new to night shifts, but sharp-eyed and quietly determined. While she checked my and monitored my pulse, something about my response to pain made her pause. My breathing was shallow, but not lifeless. My fingers twitched when she adjusted the blanket. She leaned closer and watched me, her brow furrowing as she considered the impossible that I might be pretending. Lauren moved with the discretion of someone who has seen too much to make a spectacle. She whispered to a fellow nurse that something felt off, and then approached me when the hall outside was clear. Using gestures she had learned in training, she asked me to squeeze her hand if I could hear her. I squeezed once, then twice. She froze, eyes widening. Quietly, she vowed that she would get the doctor and the police. While Lauren staged her next move, Robert managed, through pain, to whisper that he had recorded parts of the trip. He had hidden his phone on his person and set it to capture everything. When the doctor arrived, Lauren told him what she had seen. The doctor listened, then approached Nathan and Samantha with a firmness that did not suit the sympathy they were performing in the waiting room. A hospital security officer and an on-call detective were called in. As technicians downloaded the recording from Robert's phone, the reality of what had happened on the mountain began to emerge. Hard evidence, planning, rehearsed lines, the shove, the cold language Nathan used about removing obstacles. The staff watched Nathan and Samantha's faces as the first clips played, shock, fury, then the rapid calculation of people realizing their camouflage had been pierced. In moments, the ER shifted from a place of triage to a scene of investigation. Lauren stood by us quietly, watchful, and in her small, decisive actions, she became the first ally in a life that had been reduced to a fight for truth. The fall was a blur of terror. I remember the scream caught in my throat, the rush of wind, and the sickening crack when my body struck the rocks. Pain exploded through me, so sharp and overwhelming that I thought my life had ended in that instant. Beside me, Robert groaned, his voice faint but alive. "Hilda," he whispered, "don't move. Play dead." Those words, spoken through his agony, were our only chance. I forced my body into stillness, every muscle screaming for release. My breaths were shallow, my eyes fixed, as I listened to Nathan and Samantha crawling nearby. They had survived the fall, too, though by their groans, they were badly injured. "Are they dead?" Samantha asked through clenched teeth. Nathan's voice came, ragged but sure. "Yes. Both of them. Eyes open. No breathing." His lie was my salvation. Their conversation drifted over the rocks, cruel and casual. They rehearsed the story they would tell, how a loose stone caused Robert to fall, how I tumbled after him, and how they, brave, grieving children, had barely survived. I lay motionless, tasting blood, listening to the two people I had loved plan their escape from justice. Hours passed like years. Then, faint voices echoed from above, rescue workers. Nathan shouted for help with convincing desperation. Soon, ropes and flashlights appeared, and rescuers descended. They checked Robert first. "Faint pulse," one said. Then me. "I can't tell if she's breathing good." Let them believe I hovered between life and death.
It was safer that way.
At the hospital, chaos surrounded us. Doctors and nurses swarmed, rushing us into emergency rooms. I kept my eyes closed, my breath shallow. If Nathan or Samantha suspected I lived, they would finish the job. A young nurse, her badge reading "9", leaned close as she checked my vitals. When she thought no one was watching, she whispered, "If you're in danger, give me a sign." I managed the tiniest twitch of my finger. Her eyes widened in shock. She understood. In his return later with 2 police officers and the chief doctor, "You're safe now," the detective whispered. "If you can hear me, open your eyes." Slowly, painfully, I did. Relief washed over the room. For the first time since the cliff, I believed we might live to tell the truth. The moment I opened my eyes, everything changed. Detective Johnson leaned forward, his voice steady but urgent. "Mrs. Thompson, we know you've been through hell, but we need you to tell us what really happened." My voice was weak, cracked, but clear enough. "My son and his wife pushed us. They tried to kill us." The detective's expression hardened. He motioned to the nurse, who nodded, confirming she had overheard Nathan's chilling whisper about Daniel. Robert, still pale and in pain, handed over his phone from the nightstand. "It's all here," he croaked. "Their voices. Their plan. Proof." The recording captured everything. Their lies about taking care of us, their cruel rehearsal of the accident, and even Samantha's bitter laugh when she thought we were dead. While police technicians reviewed the files, Nathan and Samantha sat in the waiting room downstairs, still playing the role of grieving children. They cried into tissues, spoke softly about funeral arrangements, and accepted condolences from strangers. They had no idea their performance was collapsing. "The evidence is airtight," the detective said an hour later. "We're moving now." Through the hospital window, I saw plainclothes officers quietly surround the building. Moments later, the announcement came over the radio. "Nathan Thompson and Samantha Thompson, you are under arrest for the murder of Daniel Thompson and the attempted murder of Robert and Hilda Thompson." Their reaction was immediate. Samantha shrieked, insisting she was innocent, blaming Nathan. Nathan shouted back, accusing her of being the mastermind. Their carefully crafted unity shattered in seconds. Every word of their frantic blame game was recorded, strengthening the case even further. Months later, the trial began. Walking into the courtroom, I felt both terrified and resolute. Nathan avoided my eyes. His face hardened into a mask I no longer recognized as my son's. Samantha dabbed her eyes with tissues, playing the victim. But when I stood in the witness box, I told the jury everything about Daniel's death, about the thefts, about the cliff. At the end of my testimony, I turned to Nathan. "My son died the night you killed your brother. What sat at my table for the past 25 years was a stranger." The silence in the courtroom was suffocating. The jury deliberated 3 days. When the verdict came, on all counts, I felt the weight of decades lift from my shoulders. Nathan and Samantha were sentenced to life in prison without parole. Justice had finally spoken. After the sentencing, Robert and I returned home to a house that felt both familiar and foreign. Every corner held memories, but also shadows of betrayal. The kitchen table where Nathan had once eaten his meals. The porch where Daniel had laughed about his college plans. The workshop filled with Robert's careful handiwork. All of it seemed frozen in time. Yet for the first time in decades, there were no lies lingering in the air. Only truth, painful but freeing. Our greatest concern was the children, Nathan and Samantha's 2 young ones. They had been placed in temporary foster care while the legal storm unfolded. The thought of them growing up in strangers' homes, carrying the stigma of their parents' crimes, broke my heart. Robert and I made the decision that surprised even ourselves. We would apply for custody. Those children were innocent. They had lost enough already. The process wasn't easy. There were evaluations, home visits, and endless questions about whether 2 people in their 60s were capable of raising children again. But each time the children came to visit during the process, I saw their faces light up when they entered our home. They ran through the yard, chasing each other the way Daniel and Nathan once had. They curled up on the couch with Robert, listening to his stories. They helped me bake cookies in the same kitchen where I had once taught their father. In their laughter, I heard healing. The day custody was granted, I cried harder than I had in years. It wasn't joy exactly. It was something deeper, a mixture of relief, grief, and hope. We tucked them into bed that night, and I told them about their uncle, Daniel. I told them he was kind, honest, and brave. I wanted his memory to be the one that shaped their future, not the choices of their parents. Life will never be the same. The wounds are deep, and there are nights when I still wake up hearing Nathan's voice, or Samantha's laugh echoing like a curse. But each morning, when I hear little feet running across the floorboards, I remember why Robert and I survived. We are here to give those children the life they deserve. A life built on love, honesty, and the lessons bought at such a terrible cost. Looking back, I sometimes wonder how I managed to survive it all. The lies, the betrayal, the cliff, and the truth about Daniel. For years, I believed we had built a perfect family. But perfection was only a mask hiding rot beneath the surface. When the mask finally broke, the truth almost destroyed us. Yet from the ruins of that nightmare, something unexpected grew. Robert and I may carry scars, but we also carry purpose. We are raising two children who deserve to know that love is not manipulation, that family is not about control or greed, and that the truth, though painful, is always worth facing. The hardest lesson I've learned is this: sometimes the greatest danger comes not from strangers, but from those we trust most. And while it's heartbreaking, there is power in choosing to face the truth, even when it shatters everything you thought you knew. If you are listening to my story today, I hope you take this with you. Never ignore the small doubts in your heart. Pay attention to the shadows, to the things that do not feel right. And most of all, protect yourself and those you love with honesty, no matter how hard it may be. Robert and I have begun a new chapter, not free from pain, but full of hope. Each night when I tuck my grandchildren into bed, I remember that the fight for truth and survival was not in vain. It gave them a chance at life, and that makes every scar worth it. If this story touched you, please like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Your support means more than you know. Together, we can remind the world that even in betrayal, resilience and love can still prevail.